Robert Mulqueen, May 10th, 2023. Robert Mulqueen, May 10th, 2023. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about hemolytic anemia. This is what I've chosen for my topic and presentation. So hemolytic anemia, just to give a brief introduction, is a group of disorders characterized by the destruction of red blood cells at an accelerated rate. This condition can occur due to various underlying causes, including inherited genetic defects, autoimmune reactions, infections, medications, or even exposure to certain toxins. So in a healthy individual, you can kind of see a normal red blood cell right here. These blood cells have a lifespan of about 120 days before they're naturally removed from circulation by the spleen. However, in hemolytic anemia, red blood cells are prematurely destroyed, leading to a decreased lifespan and an insufficient number of functional red blood cells in the bloodstream. This results in a reduced oxygen carrying capacity and can lead to a range of symptoms, including fatigue, weakness, shortness of breath, and pale skin. Now, there are several types and subsections of hemolytic anemia. There's autoimmune, hereditary, thalassemia, G6PD deficiency anemia, and sickle cell anemia. Now we're going to kind of look at the metabolic pathways. But before we do that, we're going to go back into the types of anemia. So first is this autoimmune anemia. In this, the body's immune system mistakenly identifies its own red blood cells as foreign invaders, as in any autoimmune disease, and produces antibodies that destroy and target them. In the hereditary anemia, this is an inherited condition characterized by an abnormal shaped red blood cell that are more fragile and prone to destruction. You can kind of see these damaged red blood cells here. In thalassemia, it refers to a group of inherited blood disorders that result in a reduced production of either the alpha or the beta cells, the chains of hemoglobin, leading to an abnormal red blood cell formation and therefore the premature destruction. In the G6PD deficiency, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, that is when a type of anemia where the red blood cells are more susceptible to destruction due to exposure to certain like foods or medications or infections, and that pathway is hurt. And then the last, of course, is the most common of sickle cell anemia. This is an inherited disorder in which the red blood cells have an abnormal crescent shape, which is why it's called the sickle cell, that sickle shape, and tend to become trapped in the blood vessels, leading to their destruction and causing various complications within the body. So within the greater span of hemolytic anemia, the enzymes that are damaged are mainly the glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme, which leads to the destruction of red blood cells faster than they can be produced. This is when facing a pathogen or a toxin or something like that. Another enzyme that is damaged is the adenosine deaminase. And this is due to the destruction of that pathway as well. Now, hemolytic anemia impacts the functions of red blood cells by destroying them. As well, a lower level of red blood cells leads to a decrease in that carrying capacity, which we just talked about. Now, this also causes a decrease in cell structure, oxygen, and leads to that bioconcave shape that you see in that sickle cell anemia. Now, this ultimately lowers the respiratory exchange level, and therefore it can, have negative effects such as shortness of breath and lower oxygen count in someone with this anemia. Now, the impact on the body. The extent of this impact of the body depends to the extent of the anemia. The first system is the cardiovascular system that is kind of impacted. Anemia can lead to a decrease in oxygen carrying cells, resulting in an increased heart rate, and that cardiac output increases in order to compensate. This can lead to heart arrhythmias and even heart failure. Anemia can also affect the respiratory system, which leads to tissue hypoxia. Hypoxia is an impact of anemia due to the lack of oxygen transport. So you can see to this photo on the right all of kind of the defects that hypoxia has within the body. And so with regarding to anemia, this hypoxia impacts the energy production as well. And so energy production is impacted because the red blood cells rely on glycolysis to produce energy. And so without as much oxygen, the metabolic pathways are disrupted, leading to a decreased ATP production and therefore an energy depletion. Now, this impact has kind of different treatments. The treatment is kind of to reduce the destruction of red blood cells. This means that someone with anemia has to go in for maybe blood transfusions, or they have to take immunosuppressants if it is the autoimmune. Maybe they're on medication for it, and as well as supportive care. Dietitians can also help develop a healthy eating plan to include foods with a lot of vitamin B12 or foods that are rich in iron, which is essential to red blood cell production. Dialysis technologists can help ensure that the dialysis process is performed safely and effectively. Physical therapists can combat weakness or fatigue by developing an exercise plan that is appropriate for the individual's needs and abilities. So those are kind of the overarching treatments for the different types of anemia. Now, to kind of talk a little bit about the disease heritability. Hemolytic anemia can result from genetic mutations that affect the structure or function of the red blood cells, or from mutations that affect other components of the blood or immune system that impact the red blood cell survival. And again, those genes involved are G6PD, HBS, and the ONC1 gene. And so genetic modifications can alter the gene expression without changing the DNA sequence, and can be influenced by various environmental factors. It is not a failure at the cell cycle, but rather a point or deletion mutation. Changes in the gene expression can also contribute to the development of hemolytic anemia, particularly in cases where the immune system recognizes the red blood cells as foreign. This occurs when the body produces antibodies against the red blood cells, leading to their destruction. And so this heritability can be due to a genetic mutation, which is, of course, passed down, or a point or delete mutation. And as you see on the picture to the right here, you have this hereditary hemolytic anemia, where the red blood cells have defective membranes already. And so it has all these cell fragments, and the red blood cells break down quicker than you have to the left in this normal looking system. Looking at genes and inheritance. So the inheritance pattern, it depends on the specific type of the condition. In hereditary cases like hemolytic anemia, the risk depends on the inheritance pattern. And so the conditions can be caused by mutations passed down from parents to children. So if both parents carry a mutated gene, their children are going to have a 25% chance of inheriting 2 copies of the mutated gene. Some types of the hemolytic anemia are inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern, while others are inherited in an autosomal recessive pattern. So it truly depends on the type of anemia, whether it's one of those 5 or whether it is kind of an offspring based off of that. And you can see to the photo to the right, this is the sickle cell trait. So you're going to have from the mom and the dad, leading to no blood disorder. You're going to lead to carriers, and then you're going to have one daughter that has that sickle cell disease. There are also a couple of environmental factors, such as smoking, alcohol consumption, poor nutrition, poor hygiene. Infection can also lead to some traces of sickle cell, not sickle cell, but hemolytic anemia. So for diagnosis and research, the first thing to look at is a complete blood count, or a CBC. This shows the number and characteristics of the different blood cells. And so in hemolytic anemia, the CBC may reveal low levels of red blood cells. You can see one right there to the right in this image. It can also show reduced hemoglobin levels and changes in the size, shape, and color of red blood cells. The second type is a peripheral blood smear. This test involves examining a sample of your blood under a microscope to assess the shape, size, and appearance of the red blood cells. And of course, in hemolytic anemia, those characteristic changes like fragmented or abnormal looking. And third is the reticulocyte count. This is when you have an overwhelming amount of young and immature red blood cells, and these are elevated numbers, and that is produced in the bone marrow in response to the destruction of red blood cells. And so if you have a lot of these, this test helps determine whether the anemia is due to an increase in red blood cell production or red blood cell destruction that leads to red blood cell production. This is not part of a routine checkup and requires referral to a specialist. As far as research goes, there is no technology, but there are methods such as the ones to the left that help diagnose and treat hemolytic anemia. So to conclude, and just a little bit of outlook, there are various factors that affect hemolytic anemia, such as whether it's hereditary or whether it's from environmental factors. Hemolytic anemia can be managed, and currently there is research going into improving diagnostic techniques, exploring targeted therapies, medications, and advancements into understanding the immune-mediated processes. Additionally, research efforts are focused on improving those diagnostic techniques and how to diagnose. Genetic research also plays a crucial role in uncovering that underlying cause of inherited forms of anemia and potentially developing gene therapies or targeted interventions. Lastly, these are my references that I used for this presentation. Thank you.